This is it, Marketing Management and Money. I'm your host, Ryan Murray.
And I'm your host, Brian Owens.
Today, we are going to be talking about your circle of concern versus your circle of influence. So this is a topic that I first heard about, Stephen Covey and his 7 Habits. He puts it into his book. We're going to take it a little bit deeper in terms of like small businesses, what they care about and what they should care about. So I think we're going to get into some good discussion today, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. This is something that obviously you can apply to a litany of different facets of your life, but like you said, we're going to delve into this in terms of a small business. So let's talk about some of the things that we can control in a small business versus things we can't control. Let's start with the things that we can't control.
Yeah. So a lot of times as a small business owner, I'm kind of looking at everything. I'm looking at this big picture, and I'm just like, okay, what decisions do I have to make? What am I going to do today? What kind of strategy am I going to put into place? And a lot of this is within our control. We can set our own pricing, and that's a big one that a lot of businesses kind of shy away from because it's scary to set your own pricing. But ultimately, you have the control. You can raise your price, you can lower your price. I have a lot of businesses when I talk about pricing, and they're just like, well, it's the market that dictates the price. And I'm like, actually, it's you that dictates the price. It's the market that agrees or disagrees with what you just dictated.
Yep.
So, you've got full control there. You've got control over your employees. And this is another area where people sometimes try and shirk their responsibility, or they don't want to take control because sometimes it's a little bit scary.
Yeah.
But, you can determine who you're going to hire, who you're going to fire. Most small businesses actually have quite a bit of flexibility. They're a lot more flexible than, big companies.
Right.
Which gives them an advantage in getting the right talent. Sometimes in these larger companies, they'll have employees that are just flat out toxic to the organization, and their hands are a little bit tied as to whether they can do anything about it. But as a small company, I can do something about it. I have a lot more leniency, a lot more flexibility that allows me to build the correct team. So, these are some of the things that that you'll see a lot of times where businesses will take control. Now, Ryan, I'm curious. When you work with businesses, do you feel like they want to take control, or you feel like they don't want to take control? And I get that it's different for every business, but what's your take on this?
So there are a lot of businesses that I've worked with in the past that, actions speak louder than words. They say, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to do X, Y, and Z," but then when it comes down to it, they'll say, "Yeah, I'm going to do that," and then they don't. "Oh, I'm putting it off. I want to wait for this," or "This isn't the right time to let this person go," or
Right.
And so you see a lot of that, and unfortunately, for example, like with letting someone go, this is part of what we can control in a business. With letting someone go, I don't know that there really ever is a good time to do that, right?
Sure.
A lot of times with company culture as well, I see this a lot where small business owners shy away from taking control of a company culture, which, number one, the small business owners don't think that they can control that. And I've been in that situation where it's some employees with some influence run away with the company culture and take it in a direction either that you don't want to see it go in, or a negative direction, these people that can become toxic. But there's never a good time to step up and grab the reins of that. You just got to do it.
Yeah. So funny example that came to mind. I was doing some work for this company, and they were pushing for a very open culture. They wanted people to come and share with management, what was going on, what the issues are. And the funny thing is like, this is the classic story. This just happens time and time again. And I was working with this company, and they had me come in and do a little bit of analysis on their management team. So I come in, and I told them, I said, hey, your management team is actually not the right people in place. My professional opinion is you do not have the right management team in place. And the owner of the company agreed with me and said, okay, we want to make some change. And so I worked with them to help put some other management in place, and it worked really well. But then when that management started to, make some of these changes that they were wanting, they said they're like, no, this isn't the direction that we want to go, and they reverted right back to what they were originally doing.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I saw with that is, I'm like, well, if you're complaining about having these cultural problems, but you're afraid to make the changes that you need to make, then you're going to live in this realm of just having these cultural problems. And it really stifled the growth of this company. And so, when you look about what we as entrepreneurs or what we as business owners have control over, and what we actually do with that control, man, those they can be two different things. So I get what you're saying when you're talking about that culture.
Yeah, so this is maybe getting a little bit more philosophical than we want to get right now, but one of the things that I like to remind these small business owners of is that you have control over yourself. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, strong leadership, strong management skills aren't necessarily their strong suit. And so it's something that they have to take control over of themselves and step up to the plate, learn what good management is, learn what strong leadership is, what that looks like, and how to implement that. But part of that process is taking control, right? It's taking the reins.
Yeah.
It's moving forward, making call, and implementing some of those things that you learn in terms of good management and good leadership practices.
Right. So let's take the flip side of that now. A lot of times we have control, but there are often times where we don't have control.
Right.
Okay. So I could have external market factors.
Yeah.
I love when you'll have like a business owner that, what do we all want to see? We want to see growth, right?
Yeah.
And so they're pushing for growth. But if the market is declining and they're pushing for growth, I'm like, well, it's doable, but you're moving in the opposite direction. There's a lot of stuff that is outside of your control right now. And, there's a proactive, we can do it mentality, but then there's also kind of an ignorant, I'm just going to move forward regardless, type position.
Right.
And so, you could have external market factors that we don't have control over, other people's choices that we don't have control over.
That's exactly what I was just thinking about. So we have employees, right?
Yeah.
And on some level, we can control them in terms of, whether they work for us or not. But on that same turn, and this is similar to the company culture example, on that same turn, we can't decide if they just up and leave.
Oh, yeah.
We can't decide if they decide to show up to work and not perform. Mm-hmm. Now, we can control some of the motivating factors there, or, the ultimate termination of their employment there. But we can't control what they choose to do.
Yeah, or their motivations.
Yep.
So, I'll see a lot of times where people will try and get an employee motivated.
Yeah.
And they start throwing stuff at that employee that motivates them.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean anything to an employee.
Right.
So
or they try to take something, they find something that works with one employee, and then they try to spread that out to the entire team. Hey, we'll do X if the entire team pulls through on A. Right?
Yeah.
And the whole team is looking at this like, there's one person that's like, yeah. Then the whole team is like, yeah,
maybe.
Oh, we're not going to tell you to your face. We're going to continue laughing at your jokes, even though they suck, and we're going to continue agreeing with these terrible, terrible rewards.
Right. So there's a weird phenomenon, and it's a little bit outside of what we're talking about today, but I think it's important enough for business owners to understand that if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I'd like to deviate. Yeah. This phenomenon is this. Oftentimes as a small business, if you have an employee who is doing well and you reward them with a raise, it is quite common that shortly after that raise, you will end up firing them.
Really?
And this happens a lot. And so here's the cautionary for business owners of, let me tell you what's happening. And for the business owners that are out there, that you're like, oh yeah, I gave someone a raise and 6 months later I fired them. If you're kind of scratching your head thinking, oh, they had so much potential, or they were really looking promising, and you're wondering what's going on, let me kind of just delve into a little bit of the psychology of what's happening here. So when employees start to show promise and you start to reward them, then they expect rewards. Mm-hmm. And as those rewards come, there's an expectation that starts to be created. And if you move that too quickly, and that's really the challenge right there, is if you move that too quickly, then their expectation level increases dramatically. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden you're dealing with a much higher expectation. And so now that you've got a higher expectation on their end, it's harder for you as the business owner to maintain those expectations. Yeah. And so and this is just my own practice. If ever I am, over a team, or if I'm advising a company that's over a team and we're talking about wages, I'm always advising them. I'm like, you give the mouse enough food you give the cat enough food that it doesn't die, but not enough food that it's, stops mousing. And so you want to make sure that hunter instinct still stays there. And if you really give them everything that they want, it creates some expectations and it's harder to manage.
Yeah. So I have a great example of that, and it's with myself.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
So
Truth time.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of a confession time right here. So I interviewed for a position. I ended up acquiring the position. In negotiation of the terms, it was, you know what? I'm totally willing to come in and prove myself, but when I prove myself, I expect this to happen. Mm-hmm. And it was a substantial increase. So I agreed to start at a much, much lower rate than I originally or normally would have expected out of this type of a given position, a marketing managerial position. But so upon negotiation, I came in and was like, you know what, I'll accept a much lower rate. But when I perform, when you see those results come in, when you see X, Y, and Z happen, I expect a substantial increase.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's exactly what happened. I get this monster. It ended up being about a $15,000 increase. And for the next probably 3 or 4 months, I really struggled. In that position to stay motivated, because it was like, well, now what? What am I doing here?
Yeah, I just climbed the peak. The only where to go is down.
Yeah, exactly. And so exactly, I'm thinking about this in terms of a small business. Like, wow, where else am I really going to go? And there were some other factors in play, and I really had to check myself. I really had to come back and be honest with myself and say, hey, there is more, and you got to step up. You got to, still be true to what you promised and those kinds of things. And it honestly took some doing to get me out of that slump.
But you pulled it out, right?
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm like, come on, give me the happy ending here. So, but, and that's interesting. So,
and then I quit 6 months later. I'm just kidding.
So if we look at, bringing it back into what we can control and what we can't control, like, a business owner, you can control the incentive or the wage or the salary or the bonus of an employee, but you can't control the way that they react to that.
Yep.
And so, that's one of the big things that really gets, business owners hung up, is they think to themselves, oh man, I just gave this person, a several $1,000 increase, and I expect this, they're giving me this instead.
Yep.
What happened here? There's disconnect, and and so there's a lot that goes in that's out of our control. One more that I'd like to talk about a little bit is we can't control competition.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people feel almost a victim to competition. They're just like, oh, I hate those guys always coming in and undercutting me, or, doing a better job, or, and we almost feel like competition is unfair or something like that. But when we have the opportunity, we turn around and do the same thing to them.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of uncontrollables that we have. So I want to throw out this question to you, to our listeners. What do you think we tend to focus on more? What we can control or what we can't control?
Oh, definitely what we can't control.
Yeah.
That's in our human nature.
That's in our human. Look at the evening news.
Yeah.
It's all, I'm worried about all these things that I didn't know about. And now that I'm watching them on the news, I'm just like, do you believe that this is happening?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm worked up in a frenzy. I can't control any of that.
Yeah.
I have zero control. So the same thing with our business is I can't control these external factors. So why am I spending all my time on this?
Exactly. And so, yeah, we waste so much time focusing on all of these things we can't control. And we can clean up our small businesses. We can make our small business more efficient and more profitable by simply focusing on what we can control. And so one of the things that is kind of underlying with what we've been talking about in terms of our own employees, in terms of competition, something to watch out for, and bringing this back to myself again, in that position that I was in, one of the things that I noticed that really helped me bring this back into perspective and turn it around was I was constantly blaming or criticizing those external factors, those things I couldn't control.
Yeah.
And so if you notice yourself blaming or criticizing external factors like that, that's probably a cue to you that, maybe I'm focusing on things that I can't control. Not this, well, I need to stop complaining. I'm going to set this goal for the year. You know what I mean? But less that and more of let's bring this back in the circle of what I can control.
And that's what we mean when we say circle of influence, circle of concern. So if we talk about it, picture, if you will, there's two circles, one inside of another, and the one that's inside is the circle of influence. What we can control is that smaller circle. It's always the smaller circle.
Yep.
And then what we care about, what we're worried about or afraid of, is the larger circle that surrounds that smaller circle. And as we focus on what we can control, whatever we focus on, whichever those two circles we focus on, is going to expand.
Yep.
And so as we focus on what we can control, that circle in the middle expands, and it's not like the things that we worry about necessarily shrink. It's that because what we can control expands, it helps us to have a better perspective. Like there's less perimeter of what we worry about and more influence of what we can control. But if we're spending all of our time focusing on what we can't control, then at that point, that circle is now getting bigger and our influence is diminishing and we're having less control. And I've seen managers, and it really is kind of a sad state, they get to this point that they're so just overwhelmed with things that they can't, like they can't cope, they can't deal with making these decisions, that they shut down. And some signs. So these are some things for our listeners to look out for. Are you becoming more reclusive? Are you spending more time shutting the door to your office or opening the door and letting people come in and share ideas? Do you accept other people's ideas, or do you try and push other people's ideas down? Are you afraid of the future, or are you hopeful of the future? I mean, there are a lot of things that you can use as a gauge to say, hey, am I focusing on my area of influence or my area of concern?
Yeah. And naturally, as we focus on this circle of influence, our psychology will shift and will naturally become happier.
Right.
It's just an innate effect of focusing in on that circle of influence.
Do the problems go away?
No, definitely not.
No.
They're still there, but you have a different outlook on how to handle those things. You're more open to other opportunities in which to deal with those different problems.
Yeah.
So they become solved quicker. They become solved in a better manner. People are more happy with the terms of solving those problems, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. I was talking to this person who, they own a business, and they were just talking about how horrible. I mean, there's like, my customers are so rude to me, and they're always trying to, dicker down the price. And I mean, this lady had become bitter.
I was just going to ask you if it was an old lady, because that totally was an old lady voice. Nice. You nailed it.
And she, so she would post on Facebook, and her posts, like, you'd read them, and you're like,
gosh,
don't post that. That's so negative and a huge turnoff. And she was losing all of her customers because when they would come into the store, it was immediately, and it just, and so I was trying to tell her, hey, by the way, you need to not be doing this. I dropped her pretty quickly as a client because I'm like, sorry, I can't do anything with your attitude.
Yeah.
And sorry, good luck.
You're grumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, things that we definitely want to look out for, things that we need to just keep our focus. And it's not a bad thing to ask people around you. You're like, dude, am I getting too caught up in the, in the thin of thick things?
Yeah. People that you trust.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something you can focus on, bringing into your circle of influence is people that you trust.
Right. Yeah. Great suggestion.
So this has been our take on the circle of concern versus the circle of influence. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. We definitely have, and we'll look out for you next time.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening.